My daughter married a dreamer, Richard said, swirling his scotch with a grin that somehow made the chandelier light look cruel. But don't worry, Alex, I hear every startup needs a mascot. His sons roared. One slapped the polished table. Even the server smirked. Across from me, Rachel tried to stifle a laugh but failed. Dad? She muttered, but it was the kind of protest that came with a smile. I didn't flinch. I just picked up my glass of wine, cheap Merlot he probably kept around for the non-drinkers, and raised it slightly. To mascots, I said, and took a sip. The thing about being humiliated by people who think they've already won is they don't notice what you're doing while they celebrate. They just assume you're folding. That night, I didn't argue, didn't defend my little app idea. I didn't tell them it wasn't an app at all, or that 3 days ago I'd inked a silent pre-seed agreement with a VC group that didn't care what my last name was. Instead, I said goodnight, kissed my wife on the cheek, and by midnight I was back in the basement, hunched over the blue light of my monitor while their laughter still rang in my head. It wasn't just the comment. It was how normal it felt to everyone, like the whole table had silently agreed years ago that I was less. Less than her brothers, less than her father, less than the polished men with Rolexes and titles who sat around that oversized mahogany table talking about deals and country clubs and liquidity events they barely understood. And that's what makes this worth telling, because some of you, maybe most, are just like me. You married into a family that talks about value at dinner, and you're the only one not holding a portfolio. You bite your tongue. You get called supportive like it's a handicap. You hear phrases like, he's trying something, with the same tone people use to describe experimental therapy. And if that's you, hit subscribe. Not because I'm some guru, but because over 97% of you listen without ever clicking that button. And truth is, when you do, it tells the team working behind this story that it's worth continuing, that someone out there gets it. Anyway, that night I didn't sleep. I built. No PR, no pitch deck, just code. Raw, fast, unstable code. I tore down the prototype I'd been wasting time refining for months and started over from scratch. No investors, no meetings, no damn slides, just a whiteboard, 3 NDA-signed Slack threads, and a name, Deep Cradle. Rachel didn't ask where I was the next morning. I think she assumed I needed to cool off. She went for brunch with her mom and posted a boomerang of mimosas clinking over the caption, "Champagne solves everything." Yeah, everything except the fact that your husband is already slipping through your fingers. That same day, I called Ethan and Dana, 2 engineers I'd worked with at the consultancy before I quit, told them I was going dark. No socials, no logos, stealth mode from day one. We build in silence or not at all. Dana asked, "You sure you want to go ghost on this? What if they beat you to market?" I told her the truth. I'm not building for them anymore. I'm building because I owe myself something I never cashed in. Belief. I don't think people understand what humiliation does to certain men. For some, it crushes. For others, it flips a switch. That dinner, those words, flipped mine. Richard thought he was just teasing his son-in-law. What he actually did was hand me the single most powerful form of fuel I'd ever felt, silent rage mixed with clarity. I moved my desk into the garage, pulled out the whiteboard, wrote one sentence, "Make them regret not asking what I was building." That was the first week. No headlines, no funding announcements, just silence and the hum of a server rack running too hot. And by the end of that week, one of Richard's favorite analysts would be knocking on my door with a valuation that made his toast look like a tombstone. I didn't quit. I disappeared. There's a difference. Quitting is loud. It comes with boxes and farewell cake and a LinkedIn post that pretends to be hopeful. Disappearing is surgical. You pull your name from the website, deactivate your Slack, forward your inbox to legal, and set your Zoom to inactive. No goodbyes, no explanation. I gave notice to HR, not my boss. Didn't even wait for a response. I just stopped showing up. Rachel found out a week later. "You left?" she asked, one eyebrow raised, more annoyed than surprised. I didn't see the point, I said, pouring coffee like we were talking about weather. Consulting wasn't taking me anywhere real. She stared at me. "We have a mortgage." I smiled into my mug. "It's paid." She blinked, then walked out of the kitchen. She didn't ask where I was going the next morning, or the next, but I saw the way she watched me now, like I'd become some foreign object in the house, a thing she couldn't label, couldn't control, and when she couldn't explain me to her friends, she just stopped mentioning me altogether. The house got quieter, but quieter was good. Quieter meant progress. In the background, the new entity was forming. I set up the LLC through an anonymized legal proxy in Delaware, registered the patent under a holding firm, transferred code repositories to a clean Git system. Ethan and Dana were already building modules from opposite coasts. We worked through encrypted video chats and a shared whiteboard that reset every 72 hours. I didn't just want stealth, I wanted vanish proof. One morning, while Rachel was out networking with her Pilates group, I drove 2 hours out of town and met Calvin in a parking garage. He used to run acquisitions for a firm in Singapore. He now works through shadows, does deals for people who want zero public trail. I handed him a term sheet with no name on it, just numbers and specs. "You're serious about this?" he asked. "Deadly," I said. He smirked and slid me a tablet. On it, 7 logos, all major firms, all in talks for Series A in our exact niche. "They're 2 quarters ahead of you," he said. "They're also wrong," I replied. "They're building for consumers. I'm not." Calvin raised an eyebrow. "Then who's the buyer?" "Everyone they're ignoring." And just like that, the deal moved. He tapped in a transfer to my LLC, handed me a hard drive with compliance architecture, and disappeared into an elevator. I never asked where he got his data. He never asked what I was really building. Back home, Rachel was scrolling Instagram in the kitchen. She looked up briefly. "You were gone a while." "Had a meeting," I said. "With who?" "Someone who doesn't post selfies from Pilates." She rolled her eyes. I grabbed a protein bar and went back to the garage. I wish I could say she grew suspicious, but the truth is, Rachel didn't want to know. She wanted me to fail, quietly, because failure is easy to explain to your father. Success, though, success without his help, that's threatening. The NDA came next, not just for the team, but for everyone. Calvin insisted. Deep Cradle wasn't just a tech play, it was a black box with rules. Nobody talks, nobody leaks, nobody even says the word Deep Cradle outside the boardroom. I signed my own copy in blood, figuratively. My wife's name wasn't on a single document, not as emergency contact, not as spouse, not even as witness. When Dana asked why, I told her flatly, "This one's just me." That night, Rachel left a job posting open on her laptop, a listing from her father's firm, junior marketing associate. I closed the lid without a word. She wanted me to come crawling. She didn't realize I was already building the escape tunnel beneath our marriage. Funny thing about stealth mode, people assume you're unemployed, that you're drifting. What they don't see is the server purring under the floorboards, the domain registrations pinging across the Atlantic, the engineers clocking in at 2 a.m. because they believe in something nobody else has seen yet. They don't see you because you've learned the art of becoming invisible on purpose, and when you finally show up again, they mistake it for a miracle. It's not. It's the plan. The distance didn't come overnight. It crept in like mold, quiet, slow, and persistent. One morning, Rachel stopped making 2 coffees. A week later, she stopped asking if I'd be joining her parents for brunch. I became background noise, a soft thud of footsteps in the garage, a closed door down the hall. Not a partner, a presence. "Maybe," she said one evening, arms folded at the kitchen island, "you should look into a real job." I didn't look up from my laptop. "Define real," she scoffed. "You know what I mean." "Do I?" She leaned back on the counter, pulling her sleeves down like armor. "It's been months, Alex. You've got this thing in the garage. No revenue, no team I've met. You don't even talk about it anymore." "It's going well," I said. "That's why I don't talk about it." "You sound like those weird crypto guys who think they're going to be billionaires off tokens and duct tape." I paused. "Crypto guys don't have signed vendor agreements with 3 major medical networks." She blinked. "What?" "Nothing," I said, and that was the point. The next day, she went to dinner with her parents, alone, no invitation, no explanation. She came back glowing. "Dad says he's willing to give you a chance," she said, tossing her clutch on the table like a trophy. "You can shadow the marketing team for a few weeks, just to get back into the rhythm, get out of your head." "Shadow?" I repeated. "You'd mostly observe, maybe help with outreach. It's not glamorous, but—" "No thank you," I said, returning to my laptop. She stared at me like I'd spat on a gift. "Alex," she said slowly, "this is a way back in, a bridge. You don't have to prove anything to anyone." I smiled, just slightly. "That's the part you don't get. I'm not trying to get back in." She left the room. She started working late again after that, claimed it was quarter-end stress, but I knew. The text came after midnight, the long showers with her phone perched just outside the curtain. I didn't need to see the screen. I'd built enough systems to know the patterns. I wasn't angry. I was working, because the deeper I fell into Deep Cradle, the clearer it all became. The way Rachel had always been more loyal to image than effort. The way Richard's voice lingered in our house even when he wasn't there. The way the people closest to you are often the last ones to believe you. But I wasn't building for belief. I was building for leverage. We hit a dev milestone that week. Our architecture went fully modular, which meant scalable overnight. Ethan messaged me at 3:42 a.m. This thing could run a hospital group blindfolded. Don't tempt me, I replied. I got an email the next day from one of our proxy firms, a list of acquisition targets, 3 companies, all competitors to Richard's diagnostics arm. I stared at the screen for a long time. That evening, Rachel asked if I wanted to come to her friend's engagement party. Will your father be there? I asked. She hesitated. Yes. Then no, I said, and walked back into the garage. From behind the door, I heard her mutter, You're wasting everything. But I wasn't. I was just reallocating. In the silence that followed, I found a strange kind of peace. She didn't believe in me. That wasn't new. The difference now was, I didn't need her to, because momentum doesn't care about approval. It only needs velocity, and I had more than enough. Dana's voice cut through the static of my third black coffee like a blade. We hit the threshold, Alex. I didn't respond at first. Just watched the upload bar crawl across the screen, one of our modules syncing with a hospital's legacy system in under 6 seconds. That wasn't just performance. That was magic. We'd built something airtight. Modular AI-assisted diagnostics that didn't just play nice with outdated systems, it rewrote their playbook. Alex? She said again. I leaned back in my chair. The garage was freezing. I hadn't noticed until that moment. My breath came out like fog. We're ready for Series B, she said. 3 firms are circling, 1 already soft-committed. I can schedule pitches this week. No pitches, I said. Make it quiet, no PR, no leaks. Use the Shelf Corp name. There was a pause on her end. You want stealth again? Especially now. Dana didn't argue. She understood. Calvin had trained her well. We weren't chasing attention. We were chasing position. And when you're that close to a kill shot, you don't wave the blade in the air. You keep it hidden until it's already buried. We pushed the button. 48 hours later, the dam broke. Calvin called first. You know what you've done? Not yet, I said. Term sheets. 15 of them. You've got Sequoia, Andreessen, Lux, and some new Singaporean fund-throwing numbers. I've never seen this early. I walked to the garage window, cracked it, lit a cigarette I'd quit 3 years ago, and waited. He kept talking. They're all asking the same thing. Who the hell are you people? No press, no founders listed, no leaks, and somehow your pre-revenue metrics are outperforming 2 Series C competitors. I took a long drag. What's the highest valuation? He hesitated. 11.2. I blinked. Million? Billion, Alex. I didn't speak. Did you hear me? I whispered it to myself. Not yet, because it wasn't time. Not yet. Rachel was still scheduling dinners with her father, still sighing whenever she heard my keyboard, still floating job postings across the breakfast table like she was helping me find a lifeboat, clueless to the fact that I had already bought the ocean. That same night, I sat down with Ethan and Dana in a locked signal call. No recordings, no logs. We don't take the offers, I said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You've lost your damn mind. We take one, I said, but not from them, not from the big ones. Why? Because they're visible. Dana nodded slowly. You want to hit someone specific. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. They knew, because tucked inside the spreadsheet of term sheets was one line item that mattered more than all the rest. A whisper from a small fund run by someone who used to work under Richard's CFO, a foot in the door I hadn't knocked on yet, but would. And when I opened it, I saw the name of a company listed under potential acquisition alignment. It was one of Richard's. He didn't know it yet, but Deep Cradle wasn't just aiming to disrupt diagnostics. We were building a black hole, one that would suck his infrastructure dry, asset by asset, until one day he'd wake up and realize his kingdom had a new landlord. I closed the laptop. Upstairs, Rachel was on the phone. She spoke in soft tones, laughed once, said something about growing apart. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I'd heard it all before. Same script, different day. Instead, I pulled a sticky note from the wall, the one that read launch at $100 million. I crossed it out, wrote, wait until they look you in the eye, because $11.2 billion means nothing until it's personal, until the people who laughed have to say your name with respect, or not at all. And I wasn't just building a company anymore. I was building the silence that would echo in every room they thought they owned. Richard had always loved these meetings, The quarterly reviews weren't just about numbers, they were performance art. He sat at the head of the table like a monarch, flanked by his two sons and whatever unfortunate junior VP was about to get humiliated for underperforming by 0.5%. He didn't run a company, he ran a theater with spreadsheets. That morning, he was in rare form, double-breasted navy suit, red tie with a pin of the company's original logo from 1986, a callback to the days when he built things, or at least claimed to. "Let's hear it," he said, swirling his coffee. "Revenue, targets, any brilliant ideas you borrowed from LinkedIn this week?" Chuckles all around. Across from him, Gregory, the CFO, cleared his throat, normally unshakable. Today, he looked like someone had tightened his collar 2 sizes too small. "Revenue's solid. Projections are in line despite some churn in diagnostics and imaging." "Churn happens," Richard said, waving it off. "Unless someone finally found a way to scan lungs with an iPhone, we're fine." Gregory hesitated. "About that." The room quieted. "There's been disruption in Tier 2 markets, mostly rural and mid-size hospital groups, accounts that were slow adopters, suddenly migrating to a new diagnostics backend." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Who?" Gregory tapped his iPad and the screen behind him flickered to life. A slide appeared, emerging threat analysis, entity, Deep Cradle Inc. The name hung in the air like a cough that wouldn't go away. "Never heard of them," Richard said, sipping his coffee. "They're stealth mode," Gregory replied. "Only surfaced in filings 2 weeks ago, but they've been operational for months under third-party proxies. Quiet deployments, no ads, no PR, just performance." "Garage fantasy," Richard muttered. "Every year some coder with a god complex thinks he's going to reinvent imaging, then gets bought for $8 million and retires to post golf videos on Twitter." "I thought the same," Gregory said, "until I pulled their board filings." He clicked. A second slide appeared, Deep Cradle Board and Technical Advisors. Richard leaned forward. Slowly, the list populated. 6 names. 3 of them were former division leads from his company, people they'd quietly laid off or tried to poach from competitors. Richard frowned. "Why weren't we aware of this?" "They use shell firms," Gregory said, "and NDAs that make Apple look loose." Richard grunted. "Fine, so they've got a few mid-level defectors. Let them burn their investor money trying to scale. Half these startups flame out once they taste real compliance." Gregory didn't move. "Anything else?" Richard snapped. "There's one more thing," Gregory said. His voice had dropped half an octave. He tapped again. The next slide loaded. It was a summary of an acquisition made the previous week, deep in legal filings. The buyer, Deep Cradle Holdings. The asset, Ridgepath Diagnostics West. Richard froze. "That's ours," he said. "Was," Gregory corrected. "They acquired it through an intermediary. We missed the counter window. Their offer was cash, immediate close." The room fell silent. For the first time, Richard's sons stopped tapping their pens. He narrowed his eyes. "Who's the founder?" Gregory didn't answer immediately. "I said, who?" Gregory swallowed. "There's only one listed majority holder. All other board members are anonymous. The filings show one name tied to 61% equity." "Who?" Richard said again, more bark than question. Gregory looked him in the eye. He opened his mouth to speak, then paused, as if unsure whether to say it at all. Richard slammed his hand on the table. "Say it." Gregory took a breath. "Alexander Grant." The name hit the room like a dropped bomb. Richard didn't move. His face was frozen, but not in confusion. Recognition. Across the table, one of his sons whispered, "Wait, Alex?" Gregory nodded slowly. No one laughed this time. No snide remarks, no jabs about garage apps or dreamers, just a long, growing silence. Richard leaned back in his chair. The room spun. His tie suddenly felt like a noose. He said nothing, because he knew exactly who Alex was, and what he was capable of when no one was looking. The room was still digesting the name when the glass door cracked open with an apologetic creak. Richard's assistant, normally robotic in her timing and demeanor, stepped in red-faced, whispering something into her phone as she crossed the threshold. "Mr. Tolland," she said, clutching the receiver like it might bite her. "Urgent call from Compliance Council. They say it can't wait." He waved her off. "Tell them I'm in a meeting." "They said now," she whispered, glancing nervously at the screen behind him. Richard exhaled sharply, annoyed. "Fine. Put it on speaker." She placed the handset on the table and hit a button. A voice crackled through, calm, measured, but unmistakably urgent. "Richard, it's Maynard. We've got a situation." "Apparently," Richard muttered. "I've just been informed my son-in-law thinks he's Steve Jobs. No, you don't understand. We've been combing the filings. Deep Cradle was structured through a nested stack of proxy firms, but the final acquisition disclosures, they're clean. No aliases, no shell ownership. So? So the founder is Alexander Grant. He owns 61% of Deep Cradle outright, not through shares, through voting class equity. The line went silent for a moment. Everyone in the room was frozen. The screen behind Gregory updated, almost in sync with the voice. Slide 7. Founder, Alexander Grant. Equity, 61%. Class A voting shares. Position, CEO and board chair. Gregory stared. One of the sons mouthed, "What the hell?" to no one in particular. And then, from the far corner of the room, a quiet voice. It was Rachel. She hadn't said a word since she arrived with Richard earlier that day, claiming she was just sitting in to learn. But now, as her father's empire shuddered in real time, her voice was small, unsure. "Wait, Alex?" All heads turned. Gregory nodded slowly. "It's him." Rachel blinked. "But, no, he was working in the garage." Richard looked at her, finally speaking, his voice low. "You didn't know?" She shook her head, dazed. "He told me it was just a prototype, said it wasn't ready." "It's more than ready," Gregory said, scrolling to the next slide. 11.2 billion valuation, closed Series B yesterday, term sheets from half the valley, and he just acquired Ridgepath, in cash. Rachel's face drained, her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked like someone who'd been tossed into a movie halfway through and couldn't figure out who the villain was. Gregory cleared his throat. "There's more." Richard didn't respond, just stared at the screen. Deep Cradle's filings show a target list, strategic verticals, 5 align with our subsidiaries. Richard's knuckles whitened around the armrest of his chair. "They're not just competing," Gregory said. "They're circling." Rachel turned to her father. "Dad, did you know?" His jaw flexed. Of course not. But he had the look of a man who'd just remembered every single time he'd mocked that name at the dinner table. Every smug jab, every backhanded toast, every patronizing "Alex is still figuring things out" he chuckled through while his son-in-law sat 2 seats down, silently carving the knife. On the screen, another update flashed. A press inquiry to Deep Cradle's legal inbox returned with a 2-word response. No comment. Rachel sank into her chair. No one moved. No one breathed. Because the joke they all thought they were in on had just become the script they were trapped inside. When I stepped through the front door that night, the house felt strangely clean, not just neat, sterile, like someone had wiped down every surface while pacing in circles. The kitchen lights were too bright. The wine bottle on the counter was open but untouched. Rachel stood next to it barefoot, arms crossed, eyes locked on me like I'd just walked into the wrong house. She didn't say hello. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, barely holding the tremor out of her voice. I set my keys on the counter, calm, unrushed, like I hadn't just shattered her family's business model and pulled the pin from a grenade no one knew I was holding. "You weren't interested," I said, heading to the fridge. She followed fast. "Don't play it like that. You hid this." I cracked a bottle of water and took a slow sip. "No, I built it. There's a difference." Her jaw tightened. "My father is furious." I raised an eyebrow. "Was he not furious when he called me a mascot at that dinner?" "That was a joke." "No," I said, calmly placing the bottle on the table. "That was his mask slipping." She stared at me, stunned by the coldness, or maybe the clarity. "He says you blindsided him," she whispered. I smiled, just slightly. "I didn't." He laughed. "That's not a blindside. That's arrogance with bad timing." She didn't reply, just stood there breathing hard. I could see the shift behind her eyes. Not anger, not yet. Confusion, realization, the slow crumbling of the narrative she'd been using to prop herself up for years. Rachel had married potential, then tolerated struggle. But what she couldn't stomach, what she never expected, was distance. The quiet, surgical distance of someone who no longer needed her validation, not her father's, not hers, no one's. "You've been working with my family's ex-employees behind my back?" she finally snapped. "Not behind," I said. "Just without." She blinked. "Why?" I didn't flinch. "Because they listened." That hit, harder than I thought it would. Her shoulders fell just a bit. She looked away. I could almost hear the gears turning, rewinding over the months of silence, the cold shoulders, the sighs at breakfast, the smug dinner parties. All the moments she thought she was gently pushing me toward reality, not realizing she'd pushed herself out of my orbit entirely. My father says he won't forgive this, she muttered. I shrugged. He forgave himself for worse. You're trying to humiliate him. I tilted my head. No, that would require effort. I just built something. His ego tripped over it. She looked at me like she was seeing someone she didn't know. And maybe she was. I had spent so long playing small in this house that the full version of me didn't even fit in the kitchen anymore. I don't know who you are right now, she said. I leaned in slightly. I'm the same man who sat across from you every night while you checked Instagram, the same man who asked for 5 minutes to explain a prototype and got told later. Every time. I didn't change. You just stopped looking. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Whatever comeback she had evaporated under the weight of her own awareness. I started toward the stairs. She called after me. So what happens now? I paused at the landing, turned just enough to meet her eyes. Now, I said, now I get some sleep. Big day tomorrow. And I climbed the stairs, leaving her in that too-clean kitchen, standing between an unopened bottle of wine and the soundproof silence of someone she no longer understood. She wanted a version of me she could explain at dinner. I'd become something no one at that table had language for. A week later, the first shoe dropped. It came in the form of a sterile PDF, just another legal update buried in the daily board briefing packet. Most didn't even open it at first, just a subject line. Notice of ownership transfer Ridgepath Labs, Inc. Richard was halfway through a call with one of his sons when Gregory, the CFO, burst into his office without knocking. His tie was crooked. His face was pale. Not the usual spreadsheet kind of pale. Emergency room pale. You need to read this, Gregory said, holding up a tablet like it was radioactive. I'm in the middle of something. Now. Richard narrowed his eyes but took it, scrolled. The top of the memo was simple. No fluff, no logo. Just a plain black line of text. Entity transfer recorded. Deep Cradle Holdings. 100% acquisition of Ridgepath Labs, Inc. What the hell is this? Richard snapped. We own Ridgepath. Gregory shook his head. We did. That offer we ignored 2 quarters ago? The one that didn't go through legal? Turns out it did go through, just not through us. Richard's throat made a sound like gravel. He scrolled further. Attached to the legal filing was a 1-page digital memo. No signature, no legalese, just a single sentence. All employees remain. Management will be reviewed. AG. AG? Richard asked, even though he knew. Gregory didn't answer. What does this mean? Richard snapped. It means, Gregory said slowly, you're not dealing with a startup anymore. You're dealing with a consolidator, and he just bought your backyard. That wasn't all. By noon, 3 more subsidiaries received termination notices from shared vendors who were somehow now under exclusive contract with Deep Cradle Holdings. Richard's phone lit up with calls from his own executives asking why they were suddenly locked out of vendor platforms they'd used for years. At 2:17 p.m., HR forwarded a message from Ridgepath's new transition lead. The message contained a compliance onboarding schedule. Richard's name was not on it. The email closed with a familiar signature. A. Grant, founder and CEO, Deep Cradle. Not even Alexander anymore, just A. Grant, cold, formal, surgical. Richard's assistant brought him coffee without being asked. He didn't drink it. He just stared at the window, jaw clenched, one hand gripping the edge of the desk so tightly his knuckles looked bloodless. His son came in 20 minutes later. You see this? The son asked, holding up his phone. Everyone's talking about it on internal Slack. They're freaking out. Richard didn't move. Dad? Richard finally looked up. He didn't go to the press. What? He's not posturing. No articles, no LinkedIn posts, no interviews, no quotes. So? That's what makes it worse. He was right. Deep Cradle wasn't gloating. There was no story in TechCrunch, no CEO selfie with a "We did it" banner, just legal filings, dry memos, silent signatures, and cash. Real cash. That check, the one they said no one could match, it had cleared in under 24 hours, paid in full, no financing, no contingencies. Rachel called that night. She didn't ask how her father was. She didn't ask how the company was holding up. She asked a single question. Did Alex do this? Richard didn't answer at first. Then finally, in a voice like ash, he's not just doing it, he's been planning it. She exhaled, shaky. What do we do? I don't know. It was the first time in her life she'd heard her father say those words, because this wasn't a tantrum, it wasn't a threat, it wasn't some desperate plea for respect. It was a man, quietly, ruthlessly, replacing them. And he wasn't done. The table was set like it always had been, overdone, Oversized, sterile. Crystal glasses that never held anything stronger than filtered water. Candles nobody would light. A long stretch of imported wood between people pretending they were closer than they really were. The whole thing smelled faintly of lemon polish and panic. Richard sat at the head, hands clasped, jaw locked. Rachel to his right, her mother opposite, one brother down the table fiddling with his watch, the other scrolling through his phone like this was a routine check-in and not the beginning of their bloodline's collapse. I arrived 20 minutes late. No apology, no tie. I sat down without greeting anyone. The silence was instant, thick. Richard cleared his throat theatrically. "You humiliated me," he said. I tilted my head. "No, you did that yourself. I just provided lighting." He flushed. "You stole Ridgepath. You're using back channels to gut my company." I pulled a folder from my coat and slid it across the table. Heavy paper. No logo. Just 2 words on the tab. Restructuring offer. Rachel's breath hitched. She didn't reach for it. "This is a proposal," I said calmly. "You keep your title, ceremonial, legacy. You get to sit at the head of the board table, smile for photos. But the actual board, they vote with me now." Richard didn't touch the folder, just stared. "You don't get to do this," he said, voice low. "I already did." Rachel leaned forward, her voice cracked. "What are you doing to my family?" I looked at her, not with pity, not with contempt, just with the same even stillness I'd worn in the garage for 8 months while she laughed at my silence. "What they did to me," I said, quietly. She blinked, stunned. "You're getting back at us?" "No," I said. "I'm correcting something." Her brother slammed his glass down. "This is vengeance." I turned to him. "You sat across from me for 5 years and never asked a single question about what I was building, not one. You called me the hobbyist in front of your friends. I let that slide. But the moment your diagnostics team started copying our pilot modules, that wasn't ignorance anymore. That was theft. You escalated this." He looked away. I turned back to Richard. "You had 20 years to create something worth protecting. Instead, you built a paper empire and filled it with mirrors. And now, a storm's coming, and you're trying to stand behind me like I owe you shelter." He leaned in. "You're still my son-in-law." I smiled. "Not on any documents that matter." Rachel's eyes welled up. "Alex, I was just trying to help you find your footing." "You mean when you suggested I shadow the marketing team? Or when you left the VC dinner early because I wasn't in a real phase yet? Or when you forwarded my resume to your father behind my back?" She didn't speak. "Help," I said softly. "Doesn't look like that." Across the table, Richard opened the folder at last, read the first page. His hands trembled. The terms were final, no negotiation. Just a clear list of asset control, voting rights, transition protocols, no PR, no scandal, unless he pushed. This is a betrayal," he muttered. "No," I said. "This is a response. You're destroying us." "No," I corrected. "I'm buying you time. You just don't recognize the favor because no one's bleeding yet." He stood. So did one of the brothers. Rachel didn't move. I stood last, adjusted my jacket, no rush. Before I left, I turned back to them all, the table I used to sit at like a guest. "You told me I wasn't a real entrepreneur," I said, "that I didn't belong in your world." Then I nodded at the folder. "But your world belongs to me now." And I walked out, leaving behind the candles, the crystal, and a silence they couldn't decorate away. Richard sat alone in his office, unmoving, lit only by the glow of dual monitors and the early gray light leaking through the blinds. He hadn't slept. There was still coffee in the mug from 3 a.m., cold now, untouched. His tie was off, top button undone, hair thinner than it had looked yesterday. His phone vibrated once on the desk. A single message from Gregory, the CFO. "Update, founder confirmed, valuation verified, offer accepted." He read it 3 times, no flourishes, no caveats, just facts. His mouse hovered on the company's internal site. Refresh. The homepage loaded. His name was still there, but the title had changed. Richard Tolland, honorary chair emeritus, not CEO, not chairman, just a plaque, a handwave to the past, legacy, heritage, whatever word they use when they want someone to shut up and smile. He stared at it like it might revert. It didn't. Across town, the elevator doors opened to a different kind of office. Smaller, sleek, quiet, clean glass, one security badge swipe, no marble, no reception, just motion sensor lights and people who didn't stop what they were doing when the door opened. They just nodded once, then kept moving. Alex walked in. He carried no briefcase, no laptop. just a keycard and a single manila folder tucked under one arm. He didn't speak to the assistant, didn't need to. Inside his corner office, walls matte black, minimalist, the sun poured in from floor-to-ceiling windows, a long glass desk, a whiteboard scrawled with modular architecture diagrams, and two items on the far wall. The first, a framed photo of that dinner, the one where Richard had raised his glass, face lit with smugness, flanked by sons and colleagues laughing like the future was guaranteed. The image had been taken by Rachel, cropped and filtered, once proudly posted to her social media with the caption, "Legacy in Motion." Now, it was sealed behind museum-grade glass. Next to it, mounted with surgical precision, was a single printed sheet. Simple font, no decoration. Launch day, $11.20. Billion Alex stood for a moment, hands in pockets, absorbing it like ambient light. He didn't smile, didn't exhale in triumph. He just stood there, because the moment wasn't about feeling good. It wasn't about being seen. That had never been the point. It was about being right. He walked to the desk, sat, opened the folder. Inside, vendor transition plans, employee equity schedules, a memo marked Q4 strategic target, Tolland East Division. He picked up a pen and signed it. No grand speech, no revenge quote, just ink on paper, another quiet move in a game already decided. Across the city, Richard finally stood, crossed to the liquor cabinet he hadn't opened in a decade, poured scotch into a heavy glass. He stared out the window and whispered to no one, "He warned me." But Alex hadn't warned him. Alex had worked, and when the world laughed, he sharpened the knife, not to cut, but to rewrite the ending.